I'm here today at EHRA 2026 in Paris, and I have the privilege of interviewing my colleague, good friend, and somebody who's made a huge impact on our field of cardiac pacing. Today, we're going to discuss the role of conduction system pacing for cardiac resynchronization therapy, exactly what role it should play, what we've learned from clinical trials, and what the future holds for us. So my colleague, Dr. Pugazhendi Vijayaraman from Geisinger School of Medicine is here today to help me discuss this really cutting issue. And today at EHRA, we're going to hear in late-breaking clinical trials in a couple of days about additional clinical trials in this important area. But I'd like to start off, if you could, tell us a little bit about the background of conduction system pacing, particularly as it's been used for cardiac resynchronization therapy. You've done a number of studies, sort of retrospective analysis of the role of conduction system pacing in patients with right bundle, left bundle, IVCDs, and that has sort of exploded the field into asking questions about, is it better, is it worse, is it complementary? So just tell us a little bit about some of the initial studies you did, beginning with the simple studies you did at Geisinger, comparing conduction system pacing to RV apical pacing, and then taking us to some of the registries you've been critical in getting together.
Thank you, Ken. It's again my pleasure and privilege to be with you today. As we discussed earlier, his bundle pacing we started doing about 20 years ago, and we learned a difficult way that compared to right ventricular pacing, where you have pacing-induced cardiomyopathy, his bundle pacing was able to reduce the risk of heart failure. And as we were exploring his bundle pacing for bradycardia indications, we also learned that his bundle pacing can effectively correct left bundle branch block, right bundle branch block, and so then we started applying it to cardiac resynchronization therapy. Early in the experience, it was clear that the incidence of heart failure and even mortality could be reduced in bradycardia patients compared to right ventricular pacing. Biventricular pacing, on the other hand, had a very high bar to reach to. And one of the challenges that we applied conduction system pacing is that there are many situations in biventricular pacing we find it difficult to implant a good coronary sinus lead. In these patients, we found that his bundle pacing could be a perfect alternative. And his bundle pacing was effective in correcting left bundle branch block and right bundle branch block. And you and I and few others put together a lot of data together to show that it's fairly effective and observational series. And as we developed along the way, left bundle branch pacing evolved because we had challenges with his bundle pacing and high thresholds and late rise in thresholds, which led to the development of left bundle branch pacing, which overcome a lot of those challenges. And that became a huge attractive alternative for us. And that's what we have been evaluating in the last several years to see where it can take us.
That's a good overview of the history. Where do you think we are today in trying to figure out, you bring a patient to the lab, tell us how you approach that patient. They have a left bundle. Let's start with left bundle because the majority of patients we bring to the lab have left bundle. Talk to us a little bit about what you sort of developed as your own workflow at your medical center at Geisinger for left bundle. Then tell us how that's different from right bundle and IVCDs. You developed a very nice algorithm. Share that with us.
Oh, thank you, Ken. And again, one of the advantages of using conduction system pacing has helped me understand the pathology in patients who need resynchronization therapy. So our approach is to, when a patient with left bundle branch block present, sometimes it's hard to determine from the ECG alone whether it is true left bundle branch block, is it IVCD, or is it mixed conduction disease. So our approach is to first map the His bundle, pace the His bundle at very high output, and see it can correct the left bundle branch block. If it's completely correctable, then our approach is to go with left bundle branch pacing and prove to ourselves that we have left bundle branch capture. And that will be our approach for resynchronization. If you're unable to get left bundle branch capture or inadequate correction of the left bundle branch block, then we quickly move on to biventricular pacing. If we identify that the patient has mixed conduction disease, it's left bundle branch block plus diffuse conduction delay, then we choose the approach of heart CRT, which you and I developed together, combining conduction system pacing and left ventricular pacing together to get maximal electrical resynchronization. So some patients we prefer to use his bundle pacing, especially in a patient with IVCD with no additional left bundle branch block. Then his bundle pacing plus coronary sinus pacing is our approach. But if patient has correctable partial left bundle branch block plus IVCD, and we prefer left bundle branch pacing plus coronary sinus pacing. And that's our approach for cardiac resynchronization therapies. But if we don't have left bundle branch capture, we have a very low threshold to move to biventricular pacing because we still believe biventricular pacing is a very good, effective, well-proven form of cardiac resynchronization therapy.
And that approach is true whether they have a left bundle, right bundle, or IVCD. The point is to correct the conduction system abnormality. If you don't, think about adding a CS lead or switching to pure biventricular pacing. It's easy to understand how you do it for a pacemaker, right? Tell us your approach now for patients who you want to put both leads in and they need to have an IVCD lead. What's the impact of some of these new ICD leads?
So that's a great question, Ken. Well, one of the challenges we had in combining his or left bundle with coronary sinus is that now we have to implant 4 leads in a CRT indicated patients. So that was always a challenge. The addition of one more lead and vascular access issues and non-compatibility with the MRI, all those issues were there. And thankfully, we have at least one lead that's currently commercially available and FDA approved for left bundle branch area pacing, which is the Omnia Secure Medtronic lead. There's one other lead that's completed clinical trial, and hopefully we'll hear from them in the Heart Rhythm Society late-breaking clinical trials. So our approach now is to consider if we have a true left bundle branch block very clear on the ECG, then you go with a traditional approach of 3 leads. But if you think they have IVCD or mixed disease, then use the Omnia Secure lead or any, hopefully a newer ICD lead as it comes along to place in a left bundle branch location and use a coronary sinus lead. In this combination, we maintain MRI conditionality and don't have to use an extra lead. And that's a huge opportunity for us in the future.
Now, you have the advantage of sort of being in this field since the very beginning, helping to create the field. You and I have our opinions, but we need to be able to change the guidelines. The guidelines are so important to a lot of practitioners. They want to see class 1 indications. Where is the field now in terms of, there has been some confusion, particularly recently with one of the clinical trials showing actually perhaps coronary sinus pacing is even better than conduction system pacing in a group of patients with Chagas disease. Granted, most of us don't see that disease fairly often, but what do you think the field has to be able to do to make it a class 1 indication and to make it the standard of care? Because we think it's better to resynchronize patients by capturing the LV endocardium as opposed to capturing the LV epicardium.
Absolutely. So we've had, I'm glad you mentioned those 2 clinical trials, which is a real eye-opener in a certain sense. The HeartSync study from China with 5 centers clearly showed superiority for left bundle branch pacing over biventricular pacing in a classic left bundle branch block patient. Almost similar type of patient, but from Brazil. showed that was actually inferior. Left lung branch pacing was MD. There's a huge difference between the two studies in the sense that the criteria used to confirm left lung branch capture. That is the big problem that we have in the field, in the sense that we have too many criteria. And some of these criteria, the specificity is quite poor, although it was thought to be quite good when these guidelines or Heart Rhythm Society and EHRA criteria were developed. But we now know that they don't apply as well to a CRT population. And we need to probably go back to the drawing board and help develop perfect guidelines for implant criteria when we know we have successful left lung branch capture. I think that's the big difference. And if you don't have left lung branch capture, your outcome is not going to be as good. That's why we mentioned earlier, if we cannot confirm left lung branch capture, you're better off with a classic biventricle facing. And that's the field we have still challenges, because depending on where you pace, how deep you are, how distal you are, the ECG criteria don't work as well. So we need something better that uniformly everybody can, and in that sense, hopefully we have some imaging guided directionality, and you worked on that field with new CT guidance, and you can tell us a little.
Yeah, so I think that's what's really one of the very exciting things. I think the first advance in that was the ability to record current of injury, particularly while you're implanting a left bundle lead. That's very helpful, but it doesn't tell you anatomically where you are. And you don't want to end up with an absent current of injury, indicating you've gone so far that you're actually in the LV endocardium and you have to start all over. We hate doing that. So I think there's a real need for the ability to image the cardiac conduction system, because it democratizes the procedure, makes it easy for everyone to do. We all know how to move a catheter if you know where you want to go. And it's the same principle with pacing. One of your colleagues and a person you work with very closely put together a beautiful late-breaking clinical trial last year at our annual scientific sessions at HRS, and was able to introduce a concept called hierarchical cardiac pacing. And what he showed us is that by taking retrospectively looking at CT scans in patients who had conduction system pacemakers, that the more proximal your lead was, the higher it was in the cardiac conduction system, the closer to the His bundle it was, the better outcomes patients had in terms of cardiac remodeling. And it makes sense. Many people in this field, including you, including a number of other people worldwide, have advocated for pacing the conduction system as close as possible to the His bundle, whether we call it the His bundle or the distal His bundle or the proximal left bundle branch trunk. Some of it eventually becomes semantics. But if you can see the conduction system, at least the proximal parts of it, and you can try to get a lead there and make sure you're in the conduction system, you have some current of injury in that conduction system, then I think success rates for conduction system pacing, even in sick patients with CRT, can be above 90%. If you don't have that, if you're only pacing the conduction system 60% of the time or 50 or 40% of the time, you're not going to be superior to coronary sinus lead. You're just not going to be superior. And you're not doing the patient a service by putting a lead in the septal myocardium. You may be if they're EF 65% and they're just have a heart block. That's probably better than, or that's certainly better than RV apical. But I think, look, it's like they say in real estate, location, location, location. And I think the physiology is so complex and so hard for people to spend the time, whether it's program stimulation, to confirm the position. I think anatomy is ultimately going to really make a big difference. Now, just recently, there's another paper in one of our journals also showing the ability to see the conduction system. So that ability, and particularly since most of our CRT cases are elective cases, they're not, patients in there with a heart rate of 20 waiting to get their device implanted. I think we can do that. I think the more we do that, the better we get driven by anatomy, the better we'll get when we have to do a case without anatomy. And I think it's going to be that story. You have to be sure you are where you think you are. And the EKG is just not adequate enough. And most implanters don't want to spend a lot of time using a variety of pacing maneuvers to improve those chances because, as you pointed out, the sensitivity and specificity of all the electrocardiographic criteria go down the more conduction system you have. And so to move this field forward, we're going to have to get better. Everyone's going to have to get better at implanting conduction system leads in the most proximal part of the conduction system that they can get to. And I think that's really exciting. I expect to see that happen more and more over the next several years as the software gets better. We can just imagine what it was like in the earliest days with computerized mapping systems. They were very rudimentary. And over the years, they've gotten better and better. I think the same thing will be true of this. We'll be able to see where we go, know where the conduction system is, and get really great clinical outcomes. And that's what we need, because if we just do clinical studies and people throw a bunch of leads in, and half the time they're in and half the time they're not, I think we're going to get very disappointed with the results.
Thank you, Ken. I think you summarized it really well in the sense that mapping and ablation was very rudimentary before, and we have evolved to so easier to perform ablations now. I think we need to move in the same direction for conduction system pacing. Use a combination of some degree of imaging and mapping to help us get to the proximal conduction system and be consistent in getting that there. And that's when we're going to be successful and achieve maximal electrical resynchronization for our patients who require cardiac resynchronization therapy. And it's been a wonderful having discussion with you, Ken, and I'm looking forward to the late-breaking clinical trials later tomorrow and day after, and hopefully more to continue in the Heart Rhythm Society meetings and see where this field is moving.
Yeah, there's a lot more to come. There are a lot of clinical trials, medium-sized, large clinical trials that are in process. I just want to remind the leaders, the people listening here, leaders in the field, that many years ago, there was one of the CRT trials that didn't show a benefit to CRT. So not every single trial has shown a benefit to CRT. But the meta-analysis, putting all the trials together, and it's a very powerful tool for patients who have left bundle branch flock. I suspect, and I think we're going to be able to prove in the future,